Does the person you are with encourage you to read? You have to ask, what does he bring for me? Roses or books? If someone has a stake in making you better, that person will push you towards books. Books are what we all need.
So we were driving back from the Mahotsav, and you saw something that looked like a sports stadium with lights. What was that about?
It was actually do I even find words for it? No, we saw like lines and lines of cars parked beside the road going back to his apartment. And then Darius was, I think you were in a lively mood after the session, adventurous. And then he asked me that, do you want to go see what is that? And I was like, well, okay. And seriously, to me, it sounded seriously like a sporting event. I saw those lights in the skies and someone talking to a mic, and there was this ambience and a feel of a big space in which the sound was. And I think there was a wave of applause also just after it that made me feel that, yes, it has to be a sporting event. Well, we go closer. Turns out it's a wedding, a really big wedding. And I mean, as you were, as we said, adventurous, he just said that you want to go in, and I was like, well, okay. And then we just walked in past were there guards there?
There were two guards.
Oh, nice. I don't even know if I
and two big chandeliers.
Yeah. But seriously, I mean, well, that's actually another thing that, Finland is a very small country, and even on the basic level of just horizontal space, it's just staggering how far things are. And even here at the wedding thing, the hall was, how many people would you estimate to be there? I really can't say, but just like
700-800.
Yeah, but like really big, at least on.
That's a medium-sized wedding.
But this is something that comes up repeatedly. I'm like, yes, it's so massive, and then someone's like, nah, medium.
Yeah, but as a percentage of the population of Finland.
That's true.
It was already significant. Right?
I mean, the ceremony. I mean, the strangest part of it was that it was late in the night, so the way the tables looked, I mean, it looked like people had already eaten. There were like piles and piles of.
No. Nobody is ever done with eating at an Indian wedding. Nobody would say, I have already eaten. You are always in the present continuous tense. I am eating. You are never done with eating.
But that was the thing, that the piles of plates kind of suggest that they would be done, but the eating was the only thing happening there, that people are talking to each other and just getting more and more food, and that's the whole thing. And I
should rename him to an eating instead of a wedding.
Seriously. And I mean, well, I haven't been to that much weddings, but the ones I've been to, I just start thinking that, like, this, how can these people even socialize with each other, because there are just so many.
Because their mouths are all stuffed with food.
That also. Right. And they're just eating there. I mean, I would actually love to know what's the deal with that.
And the food stalls.
Yeah, and the whole grandeur with the whole thing also, like everyone decked up and just eating away.
Even
And
when
it's a
we
bit-
left, I think they tried to give us some mithai to take
Yeah,
away.
yeah, yeah.
And we said, no thank you, because we weren't invited.
Yeah, I mean, Darius was brave, but I got a bit scared, so we had to leave. No, not scared, but restless. It was too much for me.
No, they would have felt offended at that. You didn't eat. You go to a place and you don't eat. People don't like it. It's as bad as not liking them or disrespecting them or saying you're not worth you're not worth my chew. So
But what's the deal with all the glamour and glitz? There was a stage and there were people in a band. It was like this was a rock concert. There was a lady with a mic and she was singing. And then there was food on literally on all the three corners. So one corner was stage, other three corners were just food. And it was like never ending food. Glamour on the stage, people in jewelry. They'd hung up chandeliers. There were posh cars on the side of the road.
And the lights in the sky, it was an open roof thing. The
Northern Lights in Finland.
Yeah. A bit like that.
see, it connects to the same thing, the pursuit of happiness. One thing is when you are internally joyful, and then you may dress up, not necessarily, but at times you may dress up because you are just glad. You're just glad to be. I exist, I'm glad, for no obvious reason, so I put on nice clothes. Sometimes you don't want to put on nice clothes. Sometimes you don't want to put on any clothes. So that's one thing. When dressing up and putting on jewelry is an expression of your inner wellness. And then there can be a totally different thing. When putting on jewelry and nice clothes is a substitute for the real inner thing. Because I don't have the real inner thing, therefore I am compensating by decking myself up with all the extravaganza. Similarly with eating. Nothing else to do. What can you do in a wedding except eating? Now, there is no real joy, no real love, not even on the stage where the couple is there. Even they don't really love each other. So, you have to fill yourself up with something. Love fills you up, joy fills you up. A general euphoria fills you up. And if these things are absent, then you fill yourself up with naan and biryani and kofta and shahi tukda and all the jazz, the fancy names, Chinese, Korean, Mongolian, Arctic food, name it.
Was there any Finnish food?
There.
You drop the idea and very soon it will catch ground, gain ground. Because continental, well, it's dated, obsolete. Everybody has continental. Scandinavian is a little to the north, still untried. It still has a.
Maybe it will bring me that happiness.
It will bring me that happiness. So the same thing. It's not East versus West really. You see, we are all the same in our ignorance. In our reality, we are the same, and in our ignorance, we are the same. Just that ignorance is very diversified. Your ignorance looks very different from my ignorance, just as your skin looks a lot different than mine. Fundamentally, all ignorance is one, just as truth is one. So the East fools itself in one way, the West fools itself in another way. Both, however, do nothing except fooling themselves.
Talking of wedding, you were mentioning that you've never seen a space that didn't have people in it in India. and that there just seem to be so many people, 1.4 billion people, whereas in Finland you said there were 5 million people, and there are probably 5 million people just in this road over here.
This is one of those, it's a mediocre thing, kind of things that I mentioned earlier, that we've been talking about this, that Greater Noida, for example, that this is not even like crowded. I mean,
it's one of the most planned cities in the country and least densely populated.
But I have to admit that to me, even this is a bit like too much at times. But that's the thing when you come from Finland, because in my hometown, if you get there by night, you're lucky to see anyone everywhere. Seriously, like no one anywhere.
Some animals maybe, there are a lot of forests.
Forests, yeah, but they hide. They hide. But yeah.
And you noticed it was easy to get people to come and do stuff for very little money?
Yeah, that was actually, I think this relates, I guess we have to take a little step back, because, Darius has been lending his apartment to me, which has been very, very kind of you. But there's this one thing that has been very, very, very exquisite to me, and it's the fact that he has a maid. Or do you call them maids?
Yeah, maids, helps.
Yeah. And it's funny how, I come to India and suddenly my standard of living just like jumps up a scale. That someone is actually cooking food for me and doing all this kind of stuff. It's very like, this doesn't happen in like lower middle class Finland. Like you actually, it was very new to me. And in addition to this, it's funny how, there were those days that everything possible was breaking in the apartment, and Darius just always could get someone to come and fix it all. And one day I dare to say that we had probably like 7 or 8 like separate repairmen coming in throughout the day. Like it was constantly someone was coming to the room to do something. I mean, the fridge and I think that was the day the whole electronic system went down and all kinds of stuff like this. And that also is something very different compared to Finland, because I didn't make the calls, but I could see that he could just make the call and then someone comes to immediately fix it until it breaks down again. But in Finland it's more like you can call someone to do something like this, but it actually takes time. Like you actually have to wait for it. But here, you actually get people to do stuff fast. Even the fact that people work as, is it courier? Like
couriers.
Yeah, people actually just bring everything to each other. Not where I come from. This happens not there.
That's just a very unfortunate kind of luxury Indians are enjoying, because most of their countrymen are not well off, and there are just too many countrymen. So those who have a bit of money can afford cheap labor. That's not something about India an Indian would want to be proud of, that you have services available. At the drop of a hat, you call them, they come, and the services are quite cheap. So I understand, in the language of economics, it's a big advantage. In fact, India has been gaining economically because India can provide cheap labor. China too has gained. India in services, China in manufacturing. But fundamentally, that's just in some way an exploitation of the fact that we are just too many and too poor. So people produce kids, and then what do those kids end up as? They end up as laborers, helps, maids, cooks, cleaners, plumbers. I am not berating any of these professions, but for sure I also know that being a maid or a cook or a helper is not obviously the fullest expression of one's potential. So in that sense, I am calling it unfortunate. These days we are calling it here in India as the demographic advantage or demographic dividend. We are thinking that this is what will catapult India to the foremost league of prosperous nations. We have so many young people who can work, so India will either export their work to the rest of the world or export the workers themselves to the world. Nice, but I would have rather had a situation where these many people in surplus didn't exist in the first place, because most Indians from the lower classes and the lower middle economic classes, they live pretty wretched lives. They do provide a lot of comforts and conveniences to the moneyed people, but their own lives are quite miserable. And, even $1 a day is not available to a lot of people. Just imagine $1 a day. So
yeah, and I guess I actually sometimes you get the feel for it, just maybe from the general kind of a vibe you get from people. Sometimes there can be this kind of a it's hard to find the right word for it. But for example, when I see the shop clerks and the guards and, well, the maid is very nice though, she's very polite, but it's clear that they are not enjoying themselves.
Of course.
It's a very like...
Of course. The average Indian lives a very confined, very joyless life. And you would not want to trade positions with him. No way. And believe me, a lot of that is just due to the population we have. And somehow leaders, both political and spiritual, have not been able, rather not been willing to drill this down to the Indian mind that kids are not an important part of the happiness package. That having kids is not a random event. That kids are not sent down by God. They are not divine gifts. So that concept, that having kids and having more kids is a very central thing in life, especially that of a woman, is very deeply ingrained in the Indian psyche. And that needs to be corrected. not just to control the population, but to develop the Indian mind itself. As long as Indians keep taking reproduction so seriously, they will not have time or space or energy to give respect to the more important things in life. And I'm talking especially of women. You can't imagine how much an average Indian woman spends of her whole life in just giving birth to and raising kids. Now the fertility rate has dropped to less insane levels. But just a few decades back, the average Indian woman was just continuously pregnant, one kid after the other. 4 kids, 5 kids, and 1 or 2 of them would die early, and then more kids, and then you want a baby boy in particular, so more kids. So, yeah.
And it's the funny counterpart in the West. I mean, probably many Western women also want kids, but then they have fewer ones, but they get more resources than the
now
whole,
the fertility rate, I think TFR is what, 2.1 or something in India. I may not be accurate in that case, I want to stand corrected, but it's now greatly fallen. But still, with the population that we already have, it needs to 2.1, 2.20, okay. It needs to fall even further. 2.2 is still alarming.
at least with this population.
With this population.
It's above the replacement rate.
Above the replacement level.